Hello, JFP board. I'm really happy to share that Mitra Kalita from URL Media is joining us at the top of our board meeting this February. And Mitra, please say hello, and then I'll jump right into the Q&A like a night show host.
I mean, it's like probably familiar to all of us who are journalists. It's just trying to stay employed and relevant. And I mean that sincerely. I had probably had like no interest in digital in the formal sense in terms of like learning analytics and um, uh, like coding or anything like that. But I was a page one writer for the Wall Street Journal, and I don't think it gets more like a kind of panic-inducing job title than having your livelihood tethered to a page. And so so much of my career has been trying to get in front of the next thing, and also acknowledging that the next thing might not be so bad, right? So there is a belief in communities and audience that I think is the through line of my career. I do believe in the communities that I've been reporting on, and I would say, like, just frankly struggled in the first 10 years of my career to have my work be relevant to those audiences, because I was part of this movement to diversify newsrooms. But just because you diversify newsrooms doesn't mean you diversify your audiences, right? And and so that was like a little bit of like banging my head against the wall. And that, I think, coincided with like the last gasp of newspapers um, trying to be the glues of their community, right? Like when I was at Newsday, we had a community affairs department. And when I was at the Washington Post, it was still during those like go-go years that I don't need to tell the folks on this call, um, that we could still have a good life in newspaper land. And yet I saw how that was waning. And so for me, the pivot to digital was, driven, as I mentioned, by, okay, I can't be a page one writer at the Wall Street Journal because this seems like a recipe for unemployment. But also, could there be something to the democratization I'm witnessing on the internet right now,
Mhm.
right? Is there something to someone like Michael Brown, literally lying dead for hours, and it's Twitter that makes that a story? And so I was intrigued by what felt like I'd been banging my head against the wall, and then what the internet made possible. And if I sound nostalgic at all, it's kind of funny because now I'm older. So I used to make fun of maybe some of you on the call who used to sound nostalgic, but now I'm playing that game because when the internet was good, you guys, it was so good, right? Like you could have ideas from the bottom bubble up. And that's when I was at Quartz, and it felt like who was saying something mattered less than what was being said, meaning we could really be in the business of ideas and those rising to the top. So I would say that was like the through line of my career, the pivot before this era of entrepreneurship, because the last 3 years really feels like an era. We could talk about going out on your own in a moment, but I think the LA Times and CNN years was sort of grappling with the scale game that we had created. There was a lot of good there, but there was a lot that was not so good. And I know some of you kind of shared that fight to still do good despite the nationalization of stories and um, uh, like the polarization that we sort of like just, I feel like polarization is like such an overused word, but um, just trying to break through with truth in this moment that felt um, so fraught. Like that was definitely the LA and CNN years. And then this latest era, I think, was like, how am I going to spend the rest of my life? And could I be a part of a solution to some of this that's not so dependent on scale, but understands economics and capitalism and the realities of market forces, and says I understand them. Doesn't mean I agree with them, but I could try to still be successful within these parameters. So that's the perspective I'm coming to you with. So I was at CNN in the spring of 2020. And this would be familiar to many of you. I'm sure you all kind of went through this witnessing of the pandemic, the presidential election, and the racial justice protests, right? And like where we fit into that, I think, is a question a lot of journalists had. When you're confronted with a crisis, how you still revert to what's comfortable as the response, right? And so we were still covering that summer of 2020. I remember it felt like we were still covering the elections using this playbook that was like, this is like utterly irrelevant right now, right? And so for me, I was like, I kind of see what CNN gets out of me, but I don't really know what I get out of this anymore. I don't think we're moving forward. And so I just, I launched Epicenter organically, and I share this because many of us on this call have been in the business of launching new products. You all know half of the new products we launch are like advertising driven, or a funder comes to you and they're like, if I give you $200,000, like, will you launch an investigative unit or blah? And so the story of Epicenter was really quite organic. I just want to be clear. I had no money, but what I had was like dozens of people calling every day being like, we need to get someone a bed with a ventilator at Elmhurst Hospital. We need to get a COVID test. We need more masks at blah, blah, blah. This family doesn't have a babysitter, and the mother has COVID and the father is a delivery worker, and like they're really like screwed right now, right? It was like a lot of and I don't think you can like make that role in a neighborhood up, right? Because you sort of are like the nosy, like in my house, I'm very nosy and my neighbors know that. But then as a result, they turn to me for things. And then my husband's an artist. He's so not nosy. He's very quiet. But he believes in art and using public spaces in certain ways. So he'd been active in the neighborhood in that way. So people turn to both of us in different ways. So Epicenter was launched really organically, like, hey, we have 50 friends, let's forward this query to them. And then we would hit forward over and over and over again until I was like, it's kind of silly that I work at CNN, which has a newsletter of 2 million people. It's one of the biggest newsletters in the world. Sharif Durham's can attest to this, because he was in the trenches with me at the time. And I was like, it's kind of weird that like I know all this newsletter strategy and these people are asking me for help and I can't really scale the answers. So maybe we should just use what I know. And instead of me hitting forward to 50 people over and over, we're a little more methodical in dealing with the problems of our neighborhood, right? Also, what we're doing by putting by hitting forward, and I just, again, like this might be too in the weeds, but I share this as the journalism that was being created. The answers are not with me, they're with all of you, right? And at CNN, there really was not that type. Again, it's fine. It's just not organized in that way where the answers are always with the talking heads that just like keep going, right? And so Epicenter was born pretty organically. I remember having to send a note to the head of standards being like, can I do this community newsletter? It's just an extracurricular activity because my neighborhood's like really burning right now, and it just feels like something my husband and I can do. And they were like, that's so nice of you, right? And that was, I mean, it was kind of seen as charitable, whereas I was like, this is just more efficient. And then that grew, like an audience of 50 became a few hundred as word spread. But what happened in the search for help in a neighborhood, I very quickly realized that the algorithms that favor CNN absolutely decimate an outlet like an Epicenter. I wrote an internet where I could game virality, right, based on what people are asking for. And here I'm beloved, but I can't game anything. If you need a COVID test, what do? You type in like, I need a COVID test in Jackson Heights, and what is spitting out is actually not useful to you, right? Whereas I was useful to you, but you can't discover me. This is like Captain Basic for many of you who've spent your careers in local news as well. Like this frustration with this game of scale is always against us. So I said, well, how can I create scale without sacrificing who I am? Because the history of me creating virality was like having to cover National Donut Day over and over and over again, right? It's not, let me help you find a COVID test. Let me help you. Let me be of service to you. It was, there's the economy of the internet, and you're just kind of on this hamster wheel feeding it every day. How do I break out of that? So there's a woman named Sarah Lomax who runs a Black radio station in Philadelphia. We have been friends forever, or 5 years, I guess. That's kind of forever, and in the now, and she was watching me set up Epicenter. And as I was frustrated with this, she was like, welcome to community media, right? 'Cause she's kind of, I think, laughing a little bit at me, like, oh, girlfriend from CNN can't make things go viral anymore. And I said, well, Sarah, is there a way that we could band together? Like, what if we were to like add up all of our audiences? Could that achieve not virality, but at least some type of discovery? And I tried it with the Haitian Times and TBN 24. So with the Haitian Times, there was a story we did on the census, and they ran that story and linked to us, and that story got a lot of traffic. By the way, I'm still at CNN while all this is going on, just to give you a sense of like me experimenting was turning into like media empire build, even as I'm like, this is an extracurricular activity. And then with TBN 24, there was something with COVID tests or vaccine rollout where we said, could you just run our intake form on your, they have a live stream that goes to 2 million people on Facebook. And suddenly, you can't make this up, on our intake form, at the time it was a Google form, we shifted to Airtable later, you started to see all these Bangladeshi cab drivers inserting their information.
Hmm.
And I was like, there is a way we can leverage direct audience in service of each other. And actually, to me, given what the tea leaves I'm reading on social media, could it be that direct audiences are where we need to be focusing more of our attention than building brands through social media? And so that's how URL was born. It stands for Uplift, Respect, and Love, which we thought the idea of, loving your users is kind of revolutionary. Because media, as you all know, like at the time, definitely was still mistrusted, hated, all of the things. And then just because you might want CNN gossip, like they came to me and they said, here's your next contract for the next 5 years, right? That's how it works. It's a contract system. There's more. You can have more money, more people, more, and usually those work two ways. One, you either get fired or you sign the contract. And I was like, can I just work until the last day of my contract and just fade into from CNN to like the Dinky Queens newsletter strategy? And I think that's what I'm gonna do. And Jeff, to his credit, was really gracious. I mean, he was like, tell me if I can help. I don't think there's any winning you over. And that was it. We've had many fiscal sponsors, like some interesting ones. Um, your fiscal sponsor really changes everything when it comes to ease of doing the work, the cash flow, so there's two that I'll mention. One is small and one is really big, just so you all understand like the outsized value that the ability to access this capital means for an organization like us. So one, you guys were a fiscal sponsor on the Commonwealth grant, which was only $15,000. It was for health coverage of healthcare. Two things happened. We got $15,000, and for me, that's like not a lot of money, right? But it did require an output of health stories. We cover a ton of health, as you might gather, because I'm speaking as Epicenter. We were born out of the pandemic. We did a ton of testing and staying safe, and PPE and PPP, and then the COVID vaccine rollout. So healthcare, definitely from a coverage perspective, we were covering it. But two things happened. One, our community reporter decided she wanted to go to Columbia Journalism School to get just like a pedigree. She was a first-time in her family, first-time college graduate, first-time kind of white-collar workforce entrant, if you could call Epicenter that, and then was with us for 2 years, but then wanted to go to Columbia to get like the kind of stamp, if you will, of grad school. Funding enhances what you're going to do anyway, right? And the ability to unlock dollars through a fiscal sponsor and through a grant-making organization like Commonwealth that's like, we don't really fund media, but we're watching what you're doing and we're kind of interested, right? Now they've come back and said, we don't really fund media, but God, you did a lot with $15,000. What could you do with $100,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of talk around community building. What does that look like in this new world order? And the Mellon Foundation has been obsessed with this question. They were very interested in our arts and culture work. So every week we feature an artist, we pay that artist $100, not a lot of money, but a belief that we're not just supporting through coverage arts and culture, but we're also going to support the new storytellers of this information. So it's coverage of the arts, but also sometimes we've commissioned bigger works from, let's say, a painter. Could you tell these, 3 health stories and interview them as you're painting them? Like we've done sort of cool things like that that weave the arts into our journalism. Mellon was really into that. In our work with artists, we've featured about 120 artists so far. Over and over, what is it that they need? They need time and space, right? The space in New York feels like it's being reinvented, right? With the return to work, the not return to work, the remote work, the kind of generational tensions right now. So we feel like there's a hub and spoke model. We're looking at spaces where we can support this type of storytelling, but we also, I love your organization because it seems to get this more than a lot of other journalism nonprofits. We don't see media deserts as being media deserts in a vacuum, right? Like you will often say, oh my gosh, there's no news in this town. Isn't it so sad? And we're like just focused on this one problem versus what Epicenter is discovery. Again, there are many that have known this for generations before me, but if we go into a place that is lacking for information, it might also be lacking for food, for transit, for healthcare, for a whole lot of other things. And so the idea of building community and not addressing, if not these services, at least the access to information that can help you unlock these services, to us felt really necessary, but also empowering of communities beyond just building an information ecosystem for the sake of having an information ecosystem. So the Mellon grant I'm excited about. I hope the 250K is followed by, millions more, because when you look at what it takes to support an art space, it's capital intensive. But the announcement just of like an organization like ours going after that was received so favorably. And also to me, it felt like a staking of ambition, right? And that was important.
Tell us about the network. I mean, the genesis of getting together with Sarah and kind of building out an organization that brings together different media organizations led and for community and racialized individuals. I mean, it's just there's a lot of power in that. There's a long history there, but this is really a new way of doing it. So tell us about how successful you feel like the network is in amplifying voices that haven't been amplified before.
Yeah, I'll give you a few examples. Like I think one is so just the growth of the network. So today we have 28 partners. We started with 8. It's grown quite a bit, and really with an eye towards audience. So today across the network, it's 27 million users, right? And that allows us to achieve scale. Like if you look at kind of, not to bring up the messenger, but to bring up the messenger, like they have $50 million and couldn't get to scale, right? Why? Because they operated off of the old internet that was very social dependent, algorithmic dependent, in a moment where that's all changing. For us, we're leveraging the existing audiences of partners. In some cases, they have built those audiences on social and they're still very active on social. In other cases, it's like WURD, which is a old school radio station that's just beloved and listened to in the car, or connects with people through events, or other ways that they are a convener in the community. I think one thing is recognizing everybody's strengths in the network, and that therefore they bring different strengths to the network. So it's not one size fits all. So you guys have seen examples like in election coverage, for example, an investigative outlet might be like, here you go, here are your voter guides, or here's your maps. All you have to do is plug in, and a lot of times I'll meet with those people and they'll be like, I don't know why they wouldn't use our material. And I'm like, it's because you asked the question that way, right? Like, why wouldn't they use the thing I built for us that I'm offering for free? And so we don't operate that way. And we've experimented for what it's worth in that way of like, should we provide centralized content? And we do on some things. You can take it or leave it. That's not going to be our strength. Our strength is twofold. One, financial. The advertising piece of this is key. For many of our partners, we were the first advertising they ever sold. And so what did that do? It broke them out of the cycle of philanthropy as their only model. It's a nonprofit, but their support was all philanthropic. And suddenly they have, in year one, 25K, year two, 50K. Now, the last year in 2023, there's some partners that have gotten above $100,000 from us, right? That's real money. It's not just that we're advertising and selling on their behalf, because think of what that does for an outlet. You suddenly have a media kit, right? You suddenly have Nike on your website. And what does that enable you to do? You, on your own, you can go out to the marketplace. So we feel like enabling more partners to access dollars that either say they're earmarked for BIPOC media outlets, or just earmark dollars for anyone who wants a direct audience right now, right? Because it's the diversity piece, as you know, Mizell, is just one aspect of it. We are trusted, in some cases, legacy media outlets. We've been there for a long time in our communities, in a moment where people are like, where do I put my money? Because it's not BuzzFeed or Facebook anymore, right? Mm-hmm. There's that. There's another piece, which is seeing clients respond to this. So we have one of our partners is called Watch the Yard, which I don't know if any of you are familiar, but Watch the Yard is a HBCU website, and also has Black fraternities and sorority alums from around the country. It's probably the largest multi-generational Black presence on the internet that I've seen, right? Because it's like you got 80-year-olds engaging on there and you got 18-year-olds. It's magical. NHL, we had a contract with NHL for an ad campaign. NHL came and they were like, who the hell is this Watch the Yard? We're getting so much traffic to our campaign from them. And it was like, well, that tracks, right? That a sports brand among this population would be fine. So it's also the discovery of some of these outlets, and also new ways of advertising, targeting. I mean, I feel like a lot of what we're doing in this space is revolutionary for digital media writ large. I really believe that. There's the other parts, which I'll just gloss over, but I think your board like supports this too. Operationally, people are constantly turning to us for, wait, how do I accept philanthropic dollars if I'm a for-profit? Who are the right fiscal sponsors? So I will often put people in touch with Rusty on that. How do you offer a 401k plan? And I feel like the world of journalism is filled with accelerators that don't really answer the question that you actually need the answer to. So it can be very theoretical and academic where you're like, I just need to know, just tell me what's the healthcare plan that, you know, like what are the four options that I can, and I do think as an industry, we've sort of failed to have some of those like brass tacks conversations. We have them all day long with our partners. And I think that's been why they derive value from us. We don't charge for that. It feels like, again, we're building an ecosystem and amplifying and building their capacity in the process. Their success, as you could probably hear, is 100% our success. If I could get your audience to grow, you know, 20K or whatever, that's better for me.
Well, that's a great note to end on, Mitra. That really shows that you made the right call for how you wanted to spend the rest of your career. And you couldn't be a better partner.
Oh, thank you. I really, every single one of you on this call, like, I hope you feel my gratitude. It's so sincere. You've enabled things for both organizations that we never thought possible. And I really hope everybody comes back with all the money that you've brought our way so far. That's like my parting thought is, if anyone's ever like, oh, you were the fiscal sponsor, just be like, we love that group. Give them 3 times what you're giving them. All right. And if you have any other questions, just ping me. I'm happy to engage with you offline.
All right, will do. Thank you so much, Mitra.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.